All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Hey, welcome to the Mark Thompson Show. It's Michael Shure back with you again. Glad to be here in this comfortable chair with you fine people today. Mark asked me to cover for him for a couple of days. Kim and Tony with me. Hi. It's good to be here. I've missed a couple of my, political Fridays. So it's good to be back.
I noticed. What have you been doing? You've been off having fun, partying on the weekend, long weekend?
Yeah. Partying like crazy. Actually, I was in, and I recommend that everybody go to this place because it's fantastic if you have the ability to get there. Mexico City. I was there for 3 nights with friends from all over the country. We all met in Mexico City, hung out, went to a baseball game, a Mexican League baseball game, and man, I do like that city. The food is good, the prices are good, the people are really, really nice, and I would say go to Mexico City if you can, and you might already be there listening and watching the Mark Thompson Show. Hope all of you have been well. We have a good show. We have Gary Dietrich coming up. We have an interview. Kim, you're going to tell me right now again. It's an interview Mark did. It's an interview
Mark did with Elizabeth MeLampy, and she's amazing. She wrote this book about animal festivals, and you think animal festivals, happy, fun. You go to the whatever it is, the jumping Calaveras frog contest, and it's no big deal, or you go to the clam chowder festival or whatever. But she talks about the toll that it takes on animals and digs a little bit deeper. So interesting, very interesting interview, and we have that coming up at the bottom of the show.
Yeah, that's that should be interesting. It's probably going to ruin stuff for people too. I mean, not that I don't go to animal festivals, but when you said the clam chowder festival, that sounded for like those 4 seconds. Man, I'd love to go to the clam chowder, and then you start talking about it. Maybe I won't go to the clam chowder.
It definitely makes you think about things in a different way, and that's fine. Right?
Yeah, no, that is fine. We all need perspective and
open our horizons. Yes,
we are better for it. Well, let's open with something. You know me, Kim, Tony. I can't go more than 10 minutes without talking about Beyonce.
Yes.
So yeah, that's just kind of how things
fan,
are.
Are you? Huh?
I'm a huge Beyonce fan. Well, you'll recall that Donald Trump went on his little Truth Social and talked about that he wanted Beyonce prosecuted for actually breaking the law by getting paid $11 million for endorsing Kamala Harris during an event. I think it was an event in Houston, Texas. It turns out, and you'll be shocked to learn this, the president wasn't right about this. There is no basis for this claim. It will get thrown out of courts, as so much does, and we'll get into that a little bit later too. But the payment that was made by the Harris campaign was $165,000, which is prescribed by law that they have to do that, and in order to they have to pay. You cannot take in-kind donations in a campaign, so they had to pay her production company that money, and it turns out that in fact that's exactly how much money they got, was $165,000. And even though he was saying that he wants to prosecute, that's all that was there. And so the whether or not you agree with the 165 is of no moment. It was supposed to, he is saying that it was $11 million. There was a big divide there. And of course, there is absolutely no evidence for this. So if you go to PolitiFact or factcheck.org, they looked into the $10 million claim that he made during the campaign. They found nothing that would support that. And of course, the White House has not yet responded to a request for more information in a response to, news organizations, I believe CNN, NBC, asking for proof of this, and they have not given a response. So we'll keep monitoring that. But Tina Knowles, who is Beyonce's mother, called the claim of $10 million well back a long time ago a lie, and that all that information about the social media post was taken down by Instagram as false information.
It's interesting that when asked to provide proof of that, which shouldn't be hard to do if there's a money trail, that they can't do that. They can't give the proof, but they sure don't have a problem calling for the prosecution of Beyonce or the prosecution of Kamala Harris, making these wild allegations that people were paid for their support for endorsing her when there's no evidence to suggest that at all.
Yeah, no, it's typical behavior. It's say something, accuse, have people believe that it's the truth, and then sort of let it die without responding to it or giving information. It is, you got to give them credit. It works. It works for this White House to do stuff like that. If you ask most of the people who follow or consider themselves MAGA, who support the president, whatever qualification you want to give them, if you ask most of them whether or not Beyonce Knowles took $11 million from the Harris campaign for an appearance, unquestionably, they will all say, yes, of course she did. Right. Donald Trump said they did. Of course they did.
Even though there's zero evidence and no one asks for it. Like, why wouldn't you as a citizen go, okay, well, show me.
Right.
Show me.
Yeah. I think also people don't really care, but about things that are far more important than whether the Harris campaign, by the way, Harris lost. She's out of politics. Mm-hmm. The election is over. You could say the same for Barack Obama. President Obama, no longer in power, but he was the president, right? I mean, so you could go back and look at things that you may think he did that were not legal. Again, we'll get to that a little later too. And those claims seem pretty specious as well, or certainly the way they're being spun. But the Beyonce Knowles getting money from the Harris campaign, she's not coming back to run against Donald Trump again. And so it seems like going after this stuff is part of the distraction machine from the next story we are going to talk about. And that's what they're doing with Tulsi Gabbard. That's what they're doing with so many of these stories with Barack Obama to get people's attention away from the Epstein story. We have Gary Dietrich coming on later in the show. We're going to talk about how Tulsi Gabbard is being, is trying to get back into Trump's good graces, probably. And the best way to do that is to support any kind of vendetta against one of his concocted enemies, of which President Obama is one of those. So
because she was kind of cast aside for a moment when she was talking about her ideas about what was happening with Iran's nuclear weapons, he disregarded what she had to say and went on in a different avenue and just kind of left her in the dust. So I guess, did she have to do something to, put the spotlight back on herself so that he would, become a Gabbard lover again? I don't know.
In a way, it's not even putting the spotlight on herself so much as where the spotlight is going, and that is the avenue to being adored by Donald Trump. If you're going after, any enemy of my enemy is my friend with Donald Trump, and that's exactly what she is doing in going after or making allegations about the former president, insinuating treasonous behavior. So we'll break that down with Gary Dietrich later in the show in about 20 minutes from now. And it'll be interesting because it is really the kind of thing that presidents and administrations do all the time. They just don't, distraction is a big part of scandal, but they don't create, and out of whole cloth, some accusations of treason, which is, by the way, punishable by death in America. So you could, in a way, say that that's what's being called for. But let's move on to the story that we don't want to be distracted from, Mr. President, and that is the Jeffrey Epstein story and how it does not die. And as a matter of fact, it gets worse and it gets a little different too. Donald Trump, the president, was appearing with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and that's Keir Starmer. And he was asked about what happened between he and Jeffrey Epstein. And we know that leading up to this moment, Donald Trump is saying that he would never associate with someone who was as disgusting and perverted and creepy as Jeffrey Epstein. That's what caused their break. He would not want to be someone who could ever be associated with that kind of scum. But when asked and not prepared to be asked about this, this is what President Trump had to say. And maybe now he's finally telling the truth about Epstein.
People keep writing stories about the time you threw him out of Mar-a-Lago. Can you settle that? What was it about? What caused the breach?
That's such old history. Very easy to explain, but I don't want to waste your time by explaining it. But for years, I wouldn't talk to Jeffrey Epstein. I wouldn't talk because he did something that was inappropriate. He hired help. And I said, don't ever do that again. He stole people that work for me. I said, don't ever do that again. He did it again. And I threw him out of the place, persona non grata. I threw him out, and that was it. I'm glad I did, if you want to know the truth.
Yeah,
that's different.
Well, yeah. And Kim, Tony, I mean, can you imagine somebody being so vile and disgusting and degrading and creepy as to steal someone's help? I mean, would you ever want to associate with someone like that? Michael, God.
It's hard to find good help. You know, you've got to really hold on to them when you find them.
Right. It is.
But he was saying before this, sorry to interrupt you. He was saying before this that, he kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago for being a creep. Right. That he was exhibiting creepy behavior. So he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago for being a creep. But now he says he kicked him out because he stole the help. Right. I mean,
that's and I'm taking him at his word here, because it was when Trump is this candid, there's something here. Right. There was probably somebody who worked on Trump's staff, probably his house staff at Mar-a-Lago. Let's say it was a butler or a bartender or a waiter, waitress, what have you, whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. And Jeffrey Epstein hired that person away from Donald Trump, right? He is saying that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Prior to that, when he was coming over and bringing girls and doing all this stuff and everything that was whispered about Jeffrey Epstein, all that was fine. But when he hired someone away from the Mar-a-Lago staff, all of a sudden, that was the bridge too far. That's not what America and the world thinks about Jeffrey Epstein. My God, if the only thing he ever did was stole somebody's staff away from them, I think he'd be alive and would not have been able to let's say, off himself in a cell. Somebody came in here. Epstein did steal the help. Maxwell, from one creep to another, says Colette Ziegelman Jackson. Yeah. And then there was another one. Epstein did steal the help. Maxwell was grooming them to work for Epstein. Yeah. I'm taking it even at its most innocent, which maybe I'm a fool for doing. I'm thinking the way rich people behave, that was the thing that offended Trump, nothing else. And the help that was taken was somebody who was probably part of the household staff who was excellent at their job, or maybe the office staff or what have you. But I don't think that there was anything nefarious about what those people were doing. The nefariousness was totally different. My guess is that he got upset because he, stole his butler.
Yeah. And what's interesting is now the story changes. He goes off script. You're not supposed to do that, but there he is in the UK singing a different tune. It just goes to this whole thing is hinky. We're not getting the real story. So
we haven't gotten the real story. And now, as we mentioned before, the president is trying to deflect attention from the Epstein story by going after Obama. His deputies are going after Obama, right? Well, Tulsi Gabbard, again, we'll talk about that with Gary Dietrich, but it is constantly being brought up. You have House members bringing it up, so it's not just Gabbard, the director of national intelligence. But what's incredible is that now, even within the Epstein story, he is trying to deflect. Trump talked to reporters. I don't know if we have sound of this or not, but he was saying, don't look at me with Jeffrey Epstein. You're not going to believe this, folks. He said, look at Bill Clinton. So going after another predecessor. Look at somebody who went to the island. I never went to the island. And that island, of course, is the island that Jeffrey Epstein would take women to and take friends and associates to, and where so much of what disgusts us allegedly happened.
Oh,
But
not just women, but like girls, right? And
girls.
boys.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, I meant
But he
females.
says,
And yeah.
he says that Clinton went to he said, I never went to the island, Trump said, but Clinton went 28 times. And I'm thinking to myself, how do you know Clinton went 28 times? Unless you were there
Right.
to see him 28 times, or unless there's a file that says he went 28 times. So which is it?
You're right. It's like, I was there 37 times, and I promise you, Bill Clinton was there 28 of those times.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. And those are but these are the kinds of things that Trump, let's assume for the moment that Clinton went there, right? Which I'm not saying, but if he went there once, Trump, and the way his mind works, would say, oh, he went there 28 times. And again, it's like we were talking with Beyonce with the 11 million earlier. You know, people are going to believe it. That's all he wants. He just wants his masses to think like he does, and that's the sort of cult leader part of the Trump movement. Is that they will believe anything he says. He knows it, so he does it, and the repercussions are so small because it lasts a news cycle before he changes the news cycle again. This isn't what we were talking about the other day. When we do news later, Kim, one of the remarkable things is with the shootings, there was a stabbings at a Walmart. There were shootings. There's a lot of news. There's still weather going on in this country. And even with all that, those sorts of stories were the types of stories that would lead a news cycle all the time. And now we're still talking about Donald Trump changing the subject and moving someplace else, not to mention Gaza, which we will get to as well. So
I feel like no one would be surprised if his allegations about Bill Clinton were true. We know Bill Clinton was a little skeezy with the ladies. What about the whole Lewinsky scandal? I mean, I know she was legal and of age, but we know that he had some sexual proclivities, right? So, but my point about this is, who cares? As you mentioned earlier, he's not in power. Bill Clinton is not running for office again. What I care about is that there's currently someone sitting in the Oval Office representing the American people. And that seems like it should be the focus. Not Clinton, not Obama, not previous presidents, but the current president. So he can try to kick the can over to whomever, but I don't think it really takes the focus off of himself. He's the current president.
Yeah, there's no question. Look, and it's not a defense of anybody else, but it's really about the tactic, right? It's about going after Clinton and Obama. It's about keeping the divide, keeping the wall up between two sides of the country, and the fact that nothing can be bipartisan. Everything has to be made partisan, even when there is not something that is partisan within a story. They make it partisan, right? Again, I keep teasing things that we're going to talk about later in the show, but the National Governors Association is losing a couple of members because they are also looking for partisanship rather than bipartisanship. So it's almost a reflexive thing that we're doing now. But on a story like this, it just seems a curious thing. And I don't even, whatever you may think of Bill Clinton, yeah, that stuff is on the record. And he did that and later admitted and apologized for it. But whatever that is, he's not around, right? He's an older man who is just being a former president right now, running his foundation, doing whatever he is doing, being a grandfather. So it just seems like this distraction must be being employed because there's something we don't know when we talk about, or we think we do know, with Trump and Epstein. And he knows that, and so he wants to push it aside. Which I think is incredible. And again, the other day, to continue talking about this, Ghislaine Maxwell the president was asked, I think while leaving the White House for this trip to the United Kingdom, to Scotland initially, he was asked about whether or not he would pardon Ghislaine Maxwell if that was a possibility. Let's take a look.
Yeah, well, as Tony gets the video ready, I will say that this video is from a senior legal analyst who is talking about the one right answer to that question and how Trump completely flubbed it. Like, there's one right answer. No, I will never ever pardon a child sex trafficker. No. Like, how could you go, well, I have the legal right to pardon her, but I'm not sure if I'll pardon her.
Right.
No, there's one right answer. How could you possibly say anything other than child sex trafficking? No pardon for you, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Let's see
he
if anybody
wants
has the video.
Ghislaine Maxwell. He wants
Mhm.
Ghislaine Maxwell to hear that he might pardon her, to maybe not be as cooperative as she
Mhm.
might otherwise have been, because she knows she's getting a pardon. It's completely tactical.
Yep. We have the video, Tony? I think we do. Here it comes.
Here it is.
When asked about whether you're going to cut some slack to a child predator, the immediate response from any elected official, including the president, would be a hell no, and not a I haven't really thought about it. Of course, I have the power to do so. So what do you read into the clip that we played in terms of how the president responded yesterday?
Yeah, it's the easiest question in human history that our colleague Kevin Liptak asked. A great question. It's, are you kidding me? A pardon for the single worst, or number two after Jeffrey Epstein, worst child sex trafficker in modern history? Absolutely not. And instead we get the haven't thought about it. I have the right. He's right. He has the right. And look, Michael, there's a history here. I mean, Donald Trump is a habitual pardon dangler. You can go back and look at the clips of him saying almost word for word the exact same thing about Paul Manafort, Michael Flynn, Roger Stone, right? I don't know. I haven't thought about it. And what did he do? He pardoned them all. Now, it's still hard for me to believe that Donald Trump will actually pardon or commute Ghislaine Maxwell for similar reasons that we talk about. But other people who I know who are closer to Donald Trump and who have worked with him in the past say it could well happen. So I'm not going to bet either way on that. But boy, that's hard to imagine, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, hard to imagine until you see it in action, as Ellie Honig just said. I mean, all we have to do is think about January 6th, which some people may think wasn't as bad as what Ghislaine Maxwell did, and that can be argued, I guess, but it was disgusting. But he dangles pardons for everybody. Like he that's what Honig was saying. He lets the people know that this is a possibility, and it does affect their behavior through the legal system. If they know, why do I need to cooperate? Why do I need to do anything if it's not going to help me legally as much as the possibility of a pardon from the president? I think it would be it would be a horrendous thing to do. And I don't know what the political advantages would be, because if you did it, you were essentially sort of saying to the part of your base that that is already upset with you over Epstein that you don't care about that, and therefore you don't care about them.
Well, at the end of his presidency, unless you believe the Trump 2028 flags flying all over the place, at the end of his presidency, he's not running again. So I don't know why he would care about placating a base that he no longer needs. So he could then just take care of all the people who haven't spoken out against him, Ghislaine Maxwell, if she keeps her mouth shut, right? And whomever else he wants to pardon. And he will never have to be accountable for that again.
Right. But Kim, that presupposes that he's not going to run again. In his mind, just as he thinks all the things that he's saying, in his mind, he wants to run for president again. He wants to be the permanent president. And I don't think it's really playing ridiculous 3D chess to think that, or looking at it as political 3D chess, I don't think is ridiculous to think that, okay, he's sicking the dogs on Obama now and calling him treasonous, because if Trump were to run again, it would mean that he'd somehow believe the Constitution allows him to, who then would become his immediate biggest opponent, but former President Obama. So anything to discredit his possible in his mind, and you got to go with me on this because I don't believe any of it, but you got to, I'm talking as if it was his mind. He thinks, okay, if I run again, Obama would run against me because we would find that the amendment doesn't apply to either of us, and so let's call him treasonous and socies
Am
about
I
that.
living in naive land? Am I like so just believing in the Constitution that this is the way America does things, that you can't have more than 2 terms, that I'm just the silliest girl in the world because I just don't buy that Trump is able constitutionally to
He
run
is
for a
not.
third term? Like, how are we even going down this road?
None of this is going to happen. Just understand, it's not going to happen. I'm just saying, I'm talking about it from the perspective, a little bit of the perspective of a madman, someone who would be concocting these ideas in their head. Well, I've got to go after Obama, not just because I like it as a sport, but because there's some political tactic to it. And I may not pardon Maxwell.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
I want to just reiterate, none of this is going to happen. But I am speaking from the standpoint of someone who would like it to happen, and
You
that's the
think
president.
Trump legit believes he's going to run again?
I legit believe that he thinks that he can run again.
Okay.
I don't know that he would, but I think that he will find a way to run again. Especially unless, I mean, there are all these theories that that he will be like he will resign on the last day and be pardoned by Vance and then sail off into the sunset. But I do think you have to think in the way that he thinks, and sometimes in order to understand this stuff, God forbid everybody thinks the way he thinks, but I'm just saying in terms of the way you ought to perhaps imagine things is I guess what it is. Yeah.
You're good at jumping into that weird brain of his. I don't know.
I've been around it for a minute. And then, this is a story. Well, I think I want to talk a little bit with Gary Dietrich about when he joins us about Epstein as well, because there are some political, and now you have the House, who is the House is in recess, but you have Mike Johnson, the Speaker, saying that, that with the pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell that we just talked about, he says it would give him great pause. But I want to talk about that with Gary because it speaks a little bit to what we just heard from Ellie Honig. Ordinarily, a speaker would say, absolutely not. That disgusts me. That's horrible. But the fear and the devotion at the same time that they have, for Trump is a big part of this conversation. And the way that the speaker, and I would say, when you look at the other Republican speakers that we've had recently, has done it to much better effect. He has a Republican Senate, which helps. They've got his back. But I think Mike Johnson, in terms of just as a Speaker of the House, a Republican Speaker of the House, has done a good job in that job. Not that I like what he's done at all or how he's done it, but he's managed his way through this, I guess is the best way to say it. And so that's why I found it so interesting what his reaction was to that.
To the pause. He said it would give him pause.
Yeah,
right?
It would give him pause. And
it would give you pause?
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah.
Until it happens, and then all of a sudden it'll be fine. Right. Because that's the way Mike Johnson operates.
Yeah.
He never really commits fully to anything, never really takes a stand until all of a sudden, then he has to, because he has to get behind Trump. And then all of a sudden, the wiffle-waffling, the wishy-washy thing is over, and then he's on board. Right.
I think that's also, and I sound like a bit of a Johnson backer here. Let's be clear. But I think that's part of the job of the speaker, is you do have to appeal to lots of, not just within your own party. For Republicans, that's changed. It used to be a lot easier for Republicans to appeal to everybody than it is now in the House. But Johnson has a little bit of juggling and shuffling to do because of the Freedom Caucus, and he's brought them along. And now he has Thomas Massie, who is really still upset about Epstein and has some backers with him. And so I think that I think that Johnson with this stuff has a more difficult job. But what isn't difficult is to say, no, we should not pardon a child sex trafficker.
Right.
And I think that kind of stuff, it could come back to have ramifications for Johnson. Maybe not for the president, but for the people who support him.
No, I'm looking at a guy like Mike Johnson, who says he is religious. who's, by all accounts, the biggest holy roller that there ever was. And how he could just be so bland about, oh, it gives me pause to think about pardoning a child sex trafficker. It doesn't match. It doesn't match who he says he is, who he purports to be.
Right. And she has evolved too into something that is less important than the actual Trump Epstein connection. So that Ghislaine Maxwell, the courts have already dealt with her. What the president doesn't matter. We just don't want it out there that the president had anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein more than what he says. And that is, that's absurd. Also, Mike Johnson, if you go back to, who he is, he's a Bible thumping, evangelical, Christian who has gotten to where he is by invoking the Lord as much as he can and constantly. And this is a convicted pedophile or sex trafficker. And you've got, where does the hypocrisy begin then at that point?
Right.
And so
that's right.
I would suggest it has already begun, and for that, I think that we know the answers we need to know, and I think somebody like Mike Johnson or President Trump, there are better answers to the Ghislaine Maxwell question, and we now have our old there's Delette Siegelman Jackson saying there's no Christian in MAGA, right? That there's allegedly Christian in MAGA, and smart Christians supported MAGA in 2016 because they got 3 Supreme Court judges. So, and according to some, and Randy says, according to some on the right, Maxwell is now a victim. Yeah, I believe that. I think Newsmax even ran with that as a story that she's being victimized here. Mike Johnson can't call himself a Christian if he can stand by Trump, is what Connie Johnson says. Yeah, I think that's where we're going here. That the hypocrisy is real when it comes to Mike Johnson. Speakers of the House are often hypocritical in times, but not in ways that are as blatant as this, right? They're hypocritical on legislation. They're hypocritical on priorities. They have to appease different factions within they're in their caucus, but this is a different kind of hypocritical. I will tell you that. But without making any more delay, because we've covered a little bit of ground here, and there's stuff about happening in politics that I think we would profit from a conversation with Gary Dietrich over, and that's why he is joining the Mark Thompson Show, as he does, I believe, every Monday, Kim. Gary Dietrich of CBS News, iHeart Television and Radio, political analyst. Thanks for being on with the substitute teacher today.
Hey, good to be with a sub, and I promise I'm not going to leave any bugs on your desk or do anything else as a esteemed substitute.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate the respect that substitutes would like to have. We'll start a union soon, but it just hasn't happened yet. Gary, there's a lot on the table. As you may have heard when you were waiting to come into the show, We've been talking about the Jeffrey Epstein stuff, how the president saying that he would consider a pardon or he wouldn't rule it out, or reiterating that he has the power. But what he didn't do is he didn't say no when asked if he would consider a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell. So we don't even need to put words in his mouth. He didn't say no, and he said he had the power to do it if he wanted to. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, for his part, said it would give him great pause. One of those real, from the Susan Collins, I have real concern about this bill or this nominee answer. It would give the Speaker great pause. Tell me why that's a bad place for the Speaker to be, if you believe so.
Okay. Well, first off, the update I have from today is Trump in Scotland, where he is right now, many people may know, saying when he was asked again, the Ghislaine Maxwell pardon question, said, well, that would be basically inappropriate to talk about now. All right. And then so that just sort of continues the narrative, Michael, that I think you're laying out. So let me just quickly say this about that, to quote a long time ago vice president who you probably know, but most people probably won't. Anyway, so let's go on. Threading the needle on this Epstein thing, as you well know, is exceptionally difficult for people like Trump, Mike Johnson, et cetera. It's just a political problem for them. And it's not going to go away anytime soon. It's the MAGA base saying, wait a minute. For some of us, and I'll have some numbers on that in just a moment, but like some of us, this was really important during the campaign. You kind of are almost, guaranteed this to us. And now you say it ain't going to happen. What the heck? All right. Now, interestingly, the numbers on that have just come out in terms of the polling are really interesting, Michael. Only about 10% of the MAGA base, the Trump supporters, have said this is a really important issue to them. The other 90% are like, okay, listen, I'm really happy about the tax cuts, and go down the list of the other stuff, right? Border and all that. So we'll see where this plays out. But right now, for a guy like Mike Johnson, this is really difficult because not only is he dealing with the MAGA base, more importantly for him is the math in his own chamber, right? And he cannot afford to alienate half a dozen people. Now, people go, yeah, but Mike's self-professed, I heard in the leading Christian guy, and many people have a great deal of respect for Mike Johnson, even people on the other side of the aisle who say this is a real kind of, stand-up, humble kind of a guy. But he's dealing with the political realities in the House of Representatives now, where he is skating on the most microscopic thin of ice. So there's that. As far as Trump goes, who knows? He came out today and said, apparently, well, yeah, I got invited to the island, but I said, no, I never went. That's the new update from him on the so-called Epstein Island story. So I don't know where this is going to end up, Michael, except to say it really does put especially Mike Johnson in a tough bind. Does it directly affect Trump? Not nearly as directly.
Yeah, that's true. I remember, I mean, I shouldn't say I remember when, because that sounds silly. Most of the time, the role of the Speaker of the House is to, especially if they have the majority, but if they don't, it's to get the majority, it's to hold their majority, right? Is to make, before anything, we don't care what happens in the White House. I want to be the Speaker. I want to be the president of this body, essentially. If the president of the United States is from a different party, so be it. But we want our power here in the House of Representatives, where we punch the clock every day. Has that changed, Gary, in your estimation? Is an adherence to this president, does that carry more currency even than holding on to your majority in 2026?
Well, interestingly, Michael, I think more and more those two things have converged. Mm-hmm. What do I mean? That is allegiance to Trump, or at least staying real close, right, to Donald Trump, has become the ticket to keeping the majority in the House for the most part, right? I mean, that is simply the truth. It's really interesting when you drill down on the numbers on this. There are only 3 districts in the Republican caucus that were won by Kamala Harris. All the rest were won by Donald Trump. So we talk about purple districts, and in terms of partisan makeup in some of these districts, that is very true. There are some purple districts, more than people usually talk about. But in terms of actual winners of the districts, if you're not aligned with Trump, you're probably not going to win. That's what the numbers tell us, right? And now we know that Nancy in Kentucky's, been taken on by Trump. I mean, so that is the reality. And I think it's really, really interesting that, to your point, Michael, guys like Tip O'Neill, he was a force unto himself. I mean, when he was Speaker of the House, he was some people thought him as powerful as the occupant of the White House. But now, current political milieu, and Nancy Pelosi, she kind of towed her own line. She didn't really feel like she had to do the bidding of a Biden White House or even an Obama White House to retain her power. But that is different right now.
Yeah, and that is interesting. I mean, I think in terms of political changes, things that we accepted as the norm, and whether it's anomalous to this guy, which I think a lot of people are hoping that this is this presidency, this president, this person, this political figure is an anomaly rather than a change and what will become normal. I don't know that that's true, and we won't know for quite a while. But has this part of politics changed? Because it's a fascinating, but for people who follow the House and the Senate and those elections, their own power is something that they like very much. And when you see that change and become almost co-opted or partnered with the White House in a way that it never has been. But the numbers you say are true, those 3 districts, though I think several of those went from 2020 to 24. became red from purple or even from blue. And also, we shouldn't underestimate the power of losing 3 seats to Mike Johnson either. I mean, if those districts did go, that's how tenuous his hold is right now on this. So that has to be put in, right?
Yeah, and I would say the closest analogy we have in modern political history to where I think we are now, which has alignment with the White House is the way to keep your majority if you're a Republican in the House, was the Ronald Reagan days, right? I mean, Ronald Reagan's had that kind of sway. And people are now beginning to say, you know, they're vastly different in so many different ways.
Right.
Their impact on keeping the Congress, you know, Trump is as close to Reagan as anybody we've seen. You know, you could not be a Republican. You know this, Michael. You could not be a Republican, even running for dog catcher, and not say Ronald Reagan is the man. Right.
Well, yeah, that's absolutely true. But the different dynamic there was that many Democrats would say that, and you wouldn't find very many Democrats saying that about Donald Trump. So Reagan not only had the sway over all of the Republicans, but there were Democrats who were afraid to go against Reagan as well because of how popular it was.
There is one other interesting thing that I'm just watching carefully, Michael, and you remember because the term Reagan Democrat emerged after 1980. All right. That was never a thing in the 70s or the 60s. All of a sudden, Ronald Reagan sweeps into massive power, has a historic, you know, electoral college win, as you know, in 1984. And then all of a sudden this whole, you know, the blue dog Democrat and the Reagan Democrat, and, you know, we got to change the way we approach our working class base. All of a sudden we're hearing that again, right? That refrain that we've lost our blue dog Democrats, our Reagan Democrats, you're hearing that from a lot of especially moderate parts of the Democratic Party. So they are vastly different. I don't want to equate Trump and Reagan more broadly, but just in terms of raw politics, that kind of allegiance and alliance is what we're seeing now more so than we have since then.
Yeah, there's no question. And I think there are many people that think that Joe Biden won in 2020 because he sort of portrayed himself as a Reagan Democrat out there, that he was the person who could appeal to the, you know, the classic white working class voter who went to Donald Trump in 2016. It worked. He was right. Whatever, you know, the circumstances were, every election has its own circumstances, maybe not as bizarre as a pandemic, but nonetheless, every election does have its circumstances. Well, it has its if it weren't for the circumstance, right? But I still think that's basically how Biden won, was to be that kind of Reagan Democrat. And yeah, we're never going to see that again. While we're talking, I want to get into some other things too. I want to talk about Governor Newsom. I want to talk a little bit about a few other things. But while we're on the Congress, I think it's worth noting that former governor of North Carolina, Roy Cooper, or if you're from there, Roy Cupper, is running now for the U.S. Senate for the seat of the retiring Tom Tillis. And that matters, doesn't it, Gary?
Oh, it matters a lot because it's 53-47 right now in the U.S. Senate, right? There's a 3-vote margin. People forget that Senator Thune, the head of the Republicans in the Senate, he's got a smaller majority than Mike Johnson does. Now, he doesn't have 435 cats in his chamber he's trying to herd like Mike Johnson does. He's only got 100 total, okay? Right. But he's only got, so let's, you do the math, all right? You do Susan Collins, you do Murkowski of Alaska, 2 never can be guaranteed votes when it comes to conservative measures. That's just their politics. All right. Part of it, Susan Collins' constituency in Maine, but you lose one of the 3. Now you're down only to 2. Now that makes it difficult. And you just look at history here in the first 6 months of Trump 2.0, Michael. Vance has had to go over down Pennsylvania Avenue and cast tie-breaking votes on more than one occasion. That's how close that is. So you are exactly right. Roy Cooper was very popular as a governor, two terms in North Carolina. Now, some people say his time is past. You know, that in the Trump 2.0 era, he may not have quite the luster he did, but he was the dream candidate for the Democrats. And Chuck Schumer could not be more excited today. I'm sure there's champagne corks being popped all over the mimosas in his office. And they are thrilled this is going to happen. They think they have now a really, really good shot to peel off at least one Republican in the Senate, which, by the way, given the math we probably don't have time to go into today, would be a big deal because the Democrats have a tough slog in the Senate in 26.
Yeah, they definitely do, and they would be helped. It's ironic too. I think when the Democrats are talking about getting younger and younger, their leading candidate in Maine against Susan Collins is Janet Mills, right? Who's in her, I think, mid to late 70s, and Roy Cooper is almost 70. And so that the whole youth movement thing, when it comes down to practical politics in those states, they're showing that seems to be the most practical way to go in terms of getting back to these majorities.
Yeah, you can rest assured, Michael, if those two candidates you just mentioned for the Democrats do not prevail in Maine and North Carolina, it is going to throw gasoline on that fire for Democrats. We got to go young. This is not working.
Yeah, that is really true. And I think fascinating too, because that's something that people are watching very closely within the Democratic Party more than from outside. I think it's something that Democrats are paying attention to more than anybody, because the other parties don't seem to concern themselves with the kind of demographic politics or the politics of age and whatnot. It's just about what would be the most effective way to win. And I guess we'll also see by what happens in the mayor's race in New York to a lesser extent. I'm not, I don't know that everything isn't a bellwether, even though it gives us something to talk about. But I do think that would tell us a little bit about the behavior of the party, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've hit on a really important point, Michael, and that is this whole focus on youth, kind of led by AOC and a number of others. Why is it important? Because they pinned their hope in 24 on the youth vote. And of course, that really came to the fore during the Obama years. It's like, wow, these people that, frankly, this, Michael, they were ignored for the most part in electoral politics because they weren't seen as a reliable vote. Now they talk, they have demonstrations, but they don't go to the polls. Well, when they started seeing numbers that show up that actually help them, then that turned it around. So in the aftermath of 24, of course, they said when Kamala Harris's numbers right there, especially among young males, started really dropping, they said, we got to do something about this and we got to do it fast. And that's why all the talk about the youth movement inside the Democratic Party. Yeah,
it's really interesting, and it's something that we'll follow. But I think it's worth following because it's such an unpredictable dynamic. It always has been, the youth vote, and for Democrats to only pin their hopes on that, it'll be interesting to see how that works. We talked, Gary, about politics earlier in the show when we were talking about Epstein, talking about Tulsi Gabbard, talking about deflecting. It's one of the oldest, what do? You go in and you bomb, you start a war in Grenada when you're not happy about how things are going with the Iran-Contra hearings, perhaps. And I may have that chronology wrong, but those sorts of things are very, very typical of the whole wag the dog scenario thing. So I see Tulsi Gabbard going after Barack Obama as a deflection of attention from the Jeffrey Epstein case, and now Trump himself talking about Bill Clinton. Let's not talk about me even within the Epstein case, because this is about my enemy. This is about the person who has worked against me. Now Gavin Newsom, who is a rising star in the Democratic Party. I mean, he's obviously a fixture here in California, but in terms of national politics, he certainly wants to be that rising star. He is taking on the Epstein story, and he's going to Trump. And I think we have sound of this, if I'm not mistaken, but he's talking about Trump being, I think he used the word unmoored, and this isn't the Trump we've come to know. Whether or not that if that presumes that he was previously moored, I don't know. But let's do we have we have sound on this. Let's listen to
your reaction to the fact that he is still perpetuating this lie.
Well, he's lying to cover up his prior lies and then lying again. Now he doesn't even know truth from fiction. And so, look, he's caught it red-handed. He's in the files. We know it. Period. Full stop. That's not even accurate. We know he's in the files. We know what this is all about. He told Pam Bondi, not to move forward. It's the idea that he has to fire her. He should step down himself if he fires her, because he directed her not to release these files. I always assumed that. Now we know that she briefed him. So he's lying. He's part of this cover-up. And he has confused even the most ardent observers here. I mean, the guy's a pretzel on this issue. Every hour he contradicts a statement.
We got the Olympics coming in California.
So, you have a prominent Democrat who's trying to be a nationally prominent Democrat talking about this. And breaking down the fact that he seizes on one thing here, Gary, and I think anyone who's going to run for the presidency on the Democratic side is going to be doing this next time, which is to go after places where Trump is vulnerable within his own constituency, within his own support. Good tactic?
Well, I mean, he sort of laid the groundwork. That is Gavin Newsom for this, right? When all of a sudden he became the darling of the conservative podcast this year, much to the chagrin, as you know, of people in his own party. They're like,
right.
What in the world are you inviting Charlie Kirk on your podcast for? Why are you going on XYZ podcast? I mean, he has confused a lot of people, especially inside his own party, especially when he said things like, I think it's, deeply unfair for men to be competing or boys to be competing in girls' sports. And they're like, wait a minute. Was that Gavin Newsom, our guy, saying that? So he's been confusing a lot of people, but his strategy, I think, Michael, has been exceptionally interesting and exceptionally different. Remember, over the last couple of years, he spent a lot of time in red states. He was down in Texas. He was in Florida. He was debating Ron DeSantis on Sean Hannity's show, of all places. He was putting up billboards in Texas and Florida. He started a PAC with $10 million. Running ads in these red states. So it's a really, really interesting strategy. Most people, when they're running for the presidency, are concerned about one thing, locking down their own base, which means you sort of paddled, to quote Richard Nixon, on the left side of the canoe, right? Not the right side of the canoe. But his strategy has been really interesting, which is, look, I am the guy. I'm the fighter. I'm not afraid to go into the lion's den. That has been, I think, what has set him apart more than anything else, and what some Democrats in his party really love. Others are still saying, hey, what gives with this guy? Is he really true blue, or is he more purple than he wants to let on?
Well, yeah, and I think that he is relying on his probably well-earned bona fides as a leader on social issues, which is easier to do from the mayor's office in San Francisco and the governor's office in Sacramento than it is in many parts of the country. But there's no question what you're saying is absolutely true. And it's a tactic that, look, if he succeeds, people will point to, and if he fails, people will point to also as the reason. He's doing it in a macro way and in a micro way. He says he's going to go into red counties in California and talk to those voters as well. He said that after the 24 election. I don't know if that has happened, if he's going to do that, or if it is the best use of his time now that he's, termed out of this and going to move on to something else. I'm not sure if I were advising him, I would say to continue doing that, but to do it in a macro way in red counties around the country, that probably makes some sense in terms of who the Democratic Party has to woo in this next election, whether it's for him or for a different candidate. And then I think that one of the other parts of what we're seeing in terms of the Trump stuff, the Maxwell stuff, the Epstein stuff, is how Trump is deflecting here. And Tulsi Gabbard has been a big part of that. Jason Crow, congressman from Colorado, said that there's nothing to what she is doing, what Tulsi Gabbard is doing, other than what we have said, which is as a distraction here, that there's nothing to what she is saying about those about what was in those files and what we know, and to accuse a former president of treason, which I mentioned earlier, treason punishable by death in this country. And so you could in a way infer that from these. But what do you think is behind all of this Gabbard stuff?
Well, there's all kinds of theories floating around about this. I'll tick them down super fast, Michael. One is this was another sort of background promise made by the Trump folks during the campaign, right? Listen, and Trump, of course, he hasn't let go of this in years, right? The Russia collusion hoax, this is now getting close to 10 years old. I mean, when this first started, right? And it's like, and the base has always believed the president that, this was completely made up, et cetera, et cetera. So one could see it sort of like the Epstein deal as sort of a tertiary issue floating around out there in MAGA world. And Gabbard's, laid hold of it on behalf of the president, maybe her own political leanings and career, and now is running with it. Other people say, hey, remember, she kind of got in the doghouse earlier this year with Trump. And he said, well, I really don't care what she has to say about various issues. And this is sort of a redemptive tour of, look, I'm going to take on an issue near and dear to the president, though it has almost no real bearing in in his current political environment, but it's it's become nearly ancient history for most people in Washington in terms of its real impact. So we'll see where this goes. Is it totally a smokescreen on Epstein? I had a feeling, I started wondering when both of these were going to surface, right? When's Russia going to really bubble to the surface? When Epstein really going to bubble to the surface? And interestingly, for the first 6 months, they really didn't. They were kind of in the background, Michael. And now all of a sudden it's happening. I will say this. I think there's a lot of concern, both inside the Congress and some even inside the White House quietly, to get off of these two issues, because they are not, there's a real belief they're not going to do anything for those men and women that have to run in the midterm next year, that they're net negatives, that they distract from what people believe. And this, every presidency deals with this. You feel like you have successes, be it on whatever, okay, tariffs, on the border, whatever, the big things, and you don't want these things to be distractions. That's famously what people said about things like, Clinton's dealing with, what was the name? Remember the murdered lawyer in Arkansas?
Oh, yeah, Vince Foster.
Yeah, Vince Foster. And then, of course, for Reagan, it was the Iran-Contra. I mean, these are the kind of things that can really trip up a presidency. And I don't mean to minimize Vince Foster and all. I'm just saying that was sitting out there. And, of course, Monica Lewinsky eclipsed that. Those are the things that people who have to run in 18 months or now 14, 15 months don't want to have center stage.
Yeah. Yeah. And the good fortune that people have with Jeffrey Epstein here is that everybody knows who he is, where Vince Foster was more of an anonymous figure. Both were suicides. Both were suicides that were questioned. But by the same token, I think Epstein is more part of the political parlance than the other. Let's, before we let you go, though, talk about something that Donald Trump, that some people are saying may be a victory for Donald Trump, which is what was announced in Scotland, or in Europe, I guess. I think it happened in Scotland, actually, where that 15% tariffs were agreed upon. And how is this something that Republicans and the president should and could ballyhoo? I'm saying these tariffs went from 30 to 20 to 15. So is that really a big victory for Trump?
Well, the reason it's a big victory in their mind is a couple of reasons. One is because of the things that went along with it. Trump has, again, like he did with the Japanese deal, touted the hundreds of billions of dollars of investment that are going to come to the U.S. along with the tariff deal. Now, that's not guaranteed by the governments in the EU. People should know that. That would be private sector stuff. And there's people wondering, okay, how much of this is really going to materialize? There's other pieces of it, like opening up the European market to certain American products, that hasn't happened in the past. And that, by the way, was a big part of the Japanese deal, too. A lot of closure of their markets to American products for a whole variety of reasons. Sometimes it's specification. Sometimes it's real nitty gritty stuff about, well, your rice has to be this type of rice. Believe it or not, that's true for Japan. So here's the deal. I think right now, Republicans are seeing these tariff boxes being checked as real net positives. Because remember, the big deadline, the supposed hard and fast deadline for Trump on tariffs comes this Saturday on the 2nd of August. And, apparently the EU was getting darn concerned that Trump, like it or not, would be at least semi-serious and go ahead and impose 30% tariffs on their products, which would truly have been devastating for a lot of things. Think about a car, Mercedes or something else, going up by a third overnight. So that was a concern. Now, the long term of this, Michael, is going to be the real question mark. We have not, as you know, seen a big uptick in inflation because of the tariffs. That was the big early concern. The stock market is doing well. That seems to have settled down. Wall Street's not concerned. This is going to get out of control at this point anyway. But we're going to see. I mean, the tariff, what I'm hearing is this. $20 billion in additional monthly revenue so far to the federal government from the new tariffs. $20 billion. That's almost $250 billion a year in new revenue. But the big question is, what happens as of next year, they say, when the tariffs really take effect? Will that inflation then grab hold in a very non-convenient, important midterm election year?
I'm going to channel John McLaughlin here and say you're all wrong except for Gary, who got it right. And the only thing that matters right now is what happens to the economy next year. The economy, if it's stable, is good for the Republicans, and that's all that matters. So yeah.
Hey, Michael, that's an outstanding McLaughlin, by the way, my friend.
All right, thank you very much. I don't think there's a big market for it, but I appreciate it. Gary, thanks for spending time with us today. I think we're all smarter because of it, and there's so much to talk about politically, but I think that we're talking about the biggest parts of what's going on, and that is the holding majorities in the Senate and the House, seeing what these tariffs do to the economy. And so far, all the predictions of doom haven't panned out, which in and of itself is really the victory in all of this for Trump. As low as a lot of people who listen to the show want to hear that, but sometimes facts are facts, and we won't know until later on. So, Gary, thanks for being with the show, as you always are on Mondays, and hopefully I sub in on a Monday again, and we can do this again.
Thanks, Michael. You always do a great job. Have a great show.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. And Gary Dietrich segment, as we know, is sponsored by Bill Campbell at Bill Campbell's at Remax Gold. If you're relocating into or from Northern California, you need a highly respected real estate professional like Bill Campbell of Remax Gold. Call Bill or text Bill at 530-448-7474. You can call or text him again, 530-448-7474. And that's why we have Gary Dietrich, and that's why we all benefit from Bill Campbell and Remax Gold. When we
the Mark Thompson Show.
I was going to say when we're back, but guess what? We're never not here, are we, Kim? It's always happening. Right?
That's it. We're here. We're doing it.
We're here. But you know what I want to do now? I want other news, and I want to hear it from you.
We can do that. I can make it happen.
Good. All right.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. President Trump says he wants to focus on other issues besides the Jeffrey Epstein files. While the looks like the Trump announcing the U.S. has reached an agreement with the EU over tariffs later this week. We know investors will be watching whether the Fed decides to cut interest rates or not, and Trump has been putting the pressure on Fed Chair Jerome Powell to cut rates. Most investors are expecting Powell will hold them steady. But Trump again calling the Epstein issue a hoax. He said people in charge before him would have released the files if they had anything on him. He also claimed he once turned down an invitation to Epstein's famous island. Rupert Murdoch is being pressured to quickly give a deposition in President Trump's defamation lawsuit against the media titan. Trump's $10 billion lawsuit is over the Wall Street Journal's reporting of an alleged birthday letter sent to the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein in 2003. According to the filing, Murdoch opposes the request, while the president's lawyers cited Murdoch's age as the chief argument to push for early testimony. Testify before you croak, I guess, is the way that's going to work out. The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ are hitting record highs today. And again, it comes after the president announced that the U.S. has reached an agreement with the EU over tariffs. Life-threatening heat is blanketing the Midwest and the South today. About 185 million people are under a massive heat dome. It's causing temperatures to skyrocket. In Florida, the so-called alligator Alcatraz, the subject of a court hearing. A federal judge will hear arguments over the legality of the immigrant detention facility in the Everglades. Attorneys for several detainees claim they are being held without due process and denied access to immigration courts as well. The question of whether the feds or the state of Florida is running this site is the main issue before the judge today. Multiple people are hurt after a shooting at a casino in Reno, Nevada. Police say it happened outside the Grand Sierra Resort and Casino this morning at the Valet area. Reno's mayor telling the Reno Gazette-Journal 2 people are believed killed and the others are in critical condition. The suspect has been captured after a gun battle with police and is in the hospital as well. The number of victims, though, not currently known. And as you mentioned earlier, Michael, the police are crediting a Good Samaritan or more than one of them who acted during a stabbing spree at a Michigan Walmart store on Saturday. Some people in the parking lot helped detain the suspect after a rampage with a cell phone video showing one man pointing a gun at the alleged stabber. 10 of the 11 victims remain in the hospital, but they're all expected to recover. The suspect facing a charge of terrorism and 11 counts of attempted murder as well because of that stabbing at a Michigan Walmart. Really horrible story. Scary, too. The tech company at the center of a recent controversy involving two of its executives caught on a kiss cam at a Coldplay concert is turning to Gwyneth Paltrow for an assist. The former wife of Coldplay frontman Chris Martin was hired to put a positive spin on the company, whose now former CEO and HR chief were seen cuddling with each other rather than their respective spouses. Paltrow has so far used what will be her limited time with the company called Astronomer to put out a video fielding questions. They're basically all about the cheating scandal, but she manages to refocus the conversation onto things like data automation and delivering game-changing results. So, the company line there.
Right.
There is a man who had an apparent mental break, a mental health episode, found naked in Minnesota's state capitol building on Friday night. A memo sent to Minnesota lawmakers.
All of a sudden, that's a mental health break, right? When I did it, it was just
it was a problem. When this guy does it, the man was found naked in the Senate chamber in Minnesota, making statements that he believed he was the governor. Security took the man to the hospital for an evaluation. He's coming apparently back to the Capitol grounds 2 more times on Saturday before finally he was arrested. Authorities say he's being held in connection with a warrant in Wisconsin. So this doesn't seem like it's his first time with a run-in with the police department.
Also, a state, by the way, that had a governor who made a living prior to that in a singlet. It doesn't seem like it's so bad when you think about Jesse Ventura, right?
Fantastic Four: First Steps is this weekend's winner at the box office. The latest from Marvel Studios earned $118 million at the domestic box office in its debut, then another $100 million overseas to bring its global launch to more than $218 million. That's pretty good, right? It's about even with the global opening of DC and Warner Brothers' Superman from earlier this month. Superman came in second in its third weekend, while Jurassic World Rebirth took third in its fourth weekend. So that's what people are watching. Also, I know Tony was here, but it's a wrap for San Diego Comic-Con, and George Lucas appeared for the first time ever. How was it, Tony?
Oh, well, Sunday he just was doing a thing for his museum that's opening up is what he was doing it for. So,
but you were at Comic-Con. Did you have fun?
Yeah. Oh, always. It's just hanging out, friends, drinking, whatever.
Can't go wrong
there. To the flea market once in a while, because really Comic-Con is just a flea market of stuff. It's what it really is.
Yes, you are right about George Lucas. He helped close out the convention with a panel on the famous Hall H, where he gave fans a preview of the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art that is expected to open next year in Los Angeles. He told those in attendance the museum is going to be a temple to the people. So there. Temple to the people. This report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. If you like coffee and you haven't tried the Clarity Blend, the Lion's Mane, it is very popular at our house. So good. And I know it's popular at Mark's house as well. Michael, if you had a Mark Thompson Show mug to drink it in, we would be sending you some as well. But alas, you have no mug.
Yeah, I'm going to hold it like this and just.
That's right. Yeah, like a face wash. Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure it's delicious, and I'm glad that everyone in your house is enjoying it.
So good. And I'm enjoying the tea. We have some summer teas, the hibiscus orange sun tea, so good. They've got a Lion's Mane blend tea as well. You can see it, the turmeric chai that Tony is showing on the screen. Please check out CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. If you see anything you like, make sure you use our exclusive Mark Thompson Show discount. When you get to type in the code box, it's Mark T, no spaces. Mark T gets you 10% off of your total. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. I'm Kim McAllister, and this is the Mark Thompson Show. That's right.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This is Mark Thompson.
Hey, which one of you is Mark Thompson?
Well, not me. You ask which one of us is Mark Thompson, and there's just silence on the end of the phone here. But Mark will be back this week. I'm joining us again tomorrow. I like when I say I'm joining us. It's Mark is allowed to take a breather, isn't he, Kim?
Sometimes we let him free.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I like it because I get to join all of you and do this, even if it's just for 2 days, but this has been fun. What I want to do, though, Kim, is spend a little time in the sky.
We can do it.
Well, let's do it because this is fun. There are so many good stories coming. Is this even a segment? Is this what you call it?
We have clearance, Clarence. Roger. What's our vector, Victor?
Enough is enough! I have had it with these monkey-fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane! Everybody strap in!
Yeah, Michael Shure, take me to SFO.
Yeah, I would love to. And by the way, that now that we showed a little bit of an airplane, I'm taking a little digression here. I learned more recently than I should have learned that there is a new Naked Gun coming out this week on Friday, and Liam Neeson is playing the lead in this. And I could not be more excited. I could not think it's a better choice. I mean, Leslie Nielsen was a serious actor who had apparently a very good sense of humor, but when he went to play Frank Drebin in the original ones and in Airplane, he was a serious actor, which was part of, for people of that generation, part of what made it so funny. Well, here we have Liam Neeson, who played Oscar Schindler, coming in to play, I guess, a new Frank Drebin. I don't know what he's called. I cannot wait.
I think the son. He's supposed to be Frank's son.
Oh, he's Frank's son, so he's also a Drebin. I mean, Tony, the worst thing would be if you told me you've heard bad things about it or that it's not good. I want this movie to be
I want it to be good.
So do I.
The marketing for it is fantastic. Like some of the stuff they've been doing for it, but the actual trailers for the movie, I don't know.
Oh, no.
I don't know if it's
by the way, so this is where I'm going to be a little like Donald Trump.
Pam
Even
Anderson is
if
in it too.
I'm not going to tell the truth. I'm going to say it was great after I see it. There's no way that I can ever admit that this is going to be a bad movie. I cannot wait to see this. And God, it better be funny. It really better be funny. But that's a little disappointing about the trailer because I haven't seen the trailer, and I have a bunch of movies that I want to see this coming week. You know, Superman and Jurassic Park, and I guess this Marvel one. When I don't really see Marvel movies, but I guess I should see it because everybody's seeing them, and I don't want to blow the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So. Yeah, I'm not going to hold my breath. The trailers don't inspire me, says John Watson as well. Guys, let's just all agree to lie and say it was great because I want it to be so good. Are the people behind the original?
One of the marketing for it is to save a comedy. Just go see the movie.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. So, Tony,
they did.
John's asking a question here. Are they the same people that behind the original, behind the new one? One of them passed away, but are any of them the same? Abrams and Zucker? And
I don't think so. I can look it up, but I'm pretty sure it's in name only.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if it's in name only, hopefully there's some kind of creative involvement. And that would be great. So anyway, that was our little digression, but man, I hope it's good. So let's go back to the sky. And I say this before we say anything else about it. Flying is still very, very safe. It is like they have 1 in 13.7 million flyers is the chance of anything happening to you, which is incredibly safe. And in the United States, it's even better than that. But these stories don't all make it seem safe. Some of them don't even make it seem fun. But one is a San Francisco story. Federal agents, I think this was on Saturday, but I may be wrong. It may have been yesterday, stormed the cockpit, removed a Delta co-pilot from a flight at SFO. And what happened was, I mean, they came in after the plane landed safely. It was a Delta flight from Minneapolis to San Francisco, stormed the cockpit, arrested the co-pilot, walked him off the plane, and nobody knew why. Not even the pilot sitting next to him. Said it was an uneventful flight. I haven't seen pictures of it, but the allegations now, Kim, from what I understand, are that there was some sort of sexual molestation story, or that there were material, that he was associated with materials on that. So I don't know that to be true either, obviously. So I'm not reporting this with facts. I'm reporting this with what I've been reading. What do you think of this?
I think that's crazy. The people on the plane were saying that it was disturbing because they didn't know if the guy was being disappeared or what was happening, what they were seeing there, because there was no information. They just stormed in, took the guy, stormed out. No one ever said, that he's being arrested for an ongoing case. There was never communication between the airline and the passengers, or the police and the passengers. And it was all very upsetting to people that were aboard. But yeah, you don't see that every day, where the plane lands and all of a sudden one of the pilots is being yanked out and taken away.
Right. It's usually something else. Somebody in the chat said, "Flying is safe. Your fellow passengers are not," and that's usually what it is. It's not usually the pilot you're worried about, but I guess the most important part of the story is the plane landed safely at SFO, and it's a story that we will soon and carefully follow. I also unrelated but kind of related, because it's an airplane story. Jerry Zucker, who.
Oh no, you froze for half a second. You're still frozen.
I'm frozen?
Yeah, now you're not. Jerry Zucker, what?
Jerry Zucker, who was a creator of Airplane and the other Naked Gun series, is a writer on this movie, according to Colleen Shannon, who is in the chat with us today. So that's good news, because Colleen. That means it's going to be funny, people. All right, let's go on. Let's stay in the sky here as passengers flee a smoking jet on an emergency slide after apparent landing gear problem at Denver Airport. So a plane landed at Denver International Airport, which is far from Denver, and then they all had to slide down the emergency slide because there was a problem with the landing gear, and so that was after it was during departure from Denver. I guess the plane came back. It is, if you'd like to know, a 737 MAX airplane. We know their history. There were people sliding down that inflatable chute that we all hear about in the opening remarks from the flight attendants. And while they were clutching, according to the Associated Press, clutching luggage and small children, some passengers. Yeah, some passengers. The small children might have thought the slide was fun. Maybe I don't know. No, but maybe not. But in any case, that happened at Denver Airport, and it seems everyone was safe. So.
Somewhere there's video of these people at Denver coming down the slide, and I just kind of, it's hard not to see it without picturing how I would personally react to that, or other people on the plane. And I'm sure it's really a hassle for people that are old or disabled or whatever. Like, I would think I would slide down, hop up at the end, and keep on going. But I'm sure for a lot of people, that's not the case. And this is like a big traumatic thing that happens when you have to take the rubber slide off the side of the airplane. I think Tony's got the video queued up now. Here they are. They're coming down.
Yeah.
Okay, you come down that chute pretty fast.
Yeah, you do. And it's also shorter than advertised. It looks like it goes like it's a better ride. And let's not make light of the fact that it was terrifying. One of the passengers said, Shay Armstead, a 17-year-old passenger, said that the plane was listing to the left, shaking terribly. It was and then it came to a sort of screeching halt with the brakes, and they all went forward, and then the plane came to a stop. So certainly there were seconds of absolute terror for a lot of those people, older and younger. The bottom line, again, everybody seemed safe. There were a few people that were suffering from, like, one passenger was taken to a hospital with a minor injury, and 5 people were. evaluated for injuries on the scene. But yeah,
There's a lot of smoke kicking out from the landing gear. It was a
yeah,
landing gear
that's,
fire, right? Yeah.
it was a landing gear fire. That's true. And then there is the lighter side of some of these issues. And again, whoever it was, I think it was You Matter in the chat, who said that it's the plane itself is safe. It's the passengers next to you. But I got to tell you, this is a weird story. A Spirit Airlines passenger said that she was denied boarding over shorts that were deemed too short. And you can see a photo, I think, of her. And we can also, Tony, run a little bit of video of this woman who she says, claims that she was denied boarding because of the shorts that she was wearing.
Shorty shorts, too short?
That's what they're saying.
I mean, it's, we're a long ways from the days when you used to have to dress up to go to the airport, but I don't think you can still wear, stuff with your parts hanging out.
Yeah, you can't, but right. And nothing upsets me more than people who are not like, there's a difference between putting a tie on and a dress and a hat to fly and white gloves, and just looking, a little bit more decent. I just sort of look at it in a global way, like it's just everybody's getting sloppy and casual. But
Mindy says, if you're a beautiful young woman with gorgeous legs, then why not? But the thing is, Mindy, you might not be a gorgeous young woman with beautiful legs. What if you weigh 900 pounds and your legs are not so good looking? You still have the same right to wear shorty shorts as the lady who has the gorgeous legs. I mean,
right. She said that she was treated like a criminal, and that's why she was booted off the flight. Her sister was arrested for disorderly conduct at Miami airport because that she was protesting what was going on, and they did not think that this guest was in compliance with their contract of carriage, and so the guest and their companion were eventually denied boarding after displaying disruptive behavior. So Spirit's saying it was disruptive behavior, but the woman herself is saying, Tanisha Grayer is saying that there wouldn't have been disruptive behavior if she was allowed on the flight. Do we have this video?
We're looking at it. There she is.
Yeah. There she is. Yeah.
She's got her bathrobe on.
That's what she wore. That's what she wore. This and the bathrobe. Okay.
Which looks like almost like a pajama set with a bathrobe over it. I mean, I think that's a little bit, you didn't even get dressed to come to the plane.
It is a Versace bathrobe, though. Let's not lose sight of that. I don't see I don't see a ton wrong with what she's wearing. That said, I wouldn't want someone dressed like that sitting next to me. I don't know why, and that's just me.
Donald doesn't see anything wrong with her clothing either. Yeah,
right.
He says, keep your eyeballs to yourself, people. She looks fine.
That's fine.
But Obi-Wan says, "Hey, those shorts look like undies." So maybe not.
Yeah. And just because I don't want to sit next to her does not mean that I don't want her on the flight. It just means that the person wearing a bathrobe and onto the plane is not the person I want next to me, whoever it is.
You don't want to sit next to the lady in her underwear. That's not no.
Yeah, it's just not for me. But that said, I don't think that she should be kicked off the flight until Ed Siegelman Jackson says that's why. Right. Well, we don't know. I mean, it is a Versace bathrobe. She may have been in the very front row. So let's see. But people like I don't even wear shorts on a plane. A lot of people do that. People wear shoes like flip flops and stuff. I don't do that. So this would really be a bridge too far. But in any case, they resemble boy short underwear, right? It does look a little like underwear, but again, I think she should have been able to fly.
You have to have a lot of confidence to show up at the airport in those shorts, though. And the bathrobe. It's like this is truly not caring, right?
Right. It's just sloppy. And I think that, I understand why people, why we should look a little better and all. I mean, she's a, nice looking young woman. She didn't have to wear the bathrobe and that on the plane. All right. But let's move on.
Maybe she just was thinking, I want to go to the airport and take a nap.
You're
You know,
right. That's it.
roll out of
Exactly.
bed, roll over to the airport, get on the plane, and that's it. Lights out.
Yes. So now, quickly, a Delta flight made an emergency landing at LAX after catches fire. It happened around 2:10. Delta Airlines Flight 446 was climbing during takeoff, according to the Federal Aviation Administration. The aircraft was en route to Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta Airport. The crew declared an emergency and requested immediate return to LAX when they saw flames coming out of one of the engines. Flight radar shows the DL-446 initially climbed out over the Pacific before circling back inland over the Downey and Paramount areas of LA, allowing time for the crew to complete checklists and prepare for a safe landing, which happened. No injuries reported, and they will investigate the. If I were ever, Kim, the Secretary of Transportation, not a position to which I aspire, but if I were ever that, I would change emergency landing. Every time a plane lands and it's outside their route, it has to be called an emergency landing.
Sure.
I think it should just be called an unscheduled landing. Because
you.
everything. I mean, this may in fact have been an emergency, but I do think that some of the things are not. Where a bathroom isn't working, or the hydrogen, so things are going wrong in some of the piping. Okay,
Right.
just land the plane. That's not an emergency landing. I just think that makes people too scared.
Well, when the engine catches fire, I think we have a legit emergency.
I do think so. I agree. I just, whenever I see emergency landing, I think it's too overreactive. But again, I'm never going to be
true.
that. But this one hits closer to me because I was just there. Two planes almost crash into each other in Mexico City at the airport, at Benito Juarez Airport, where I just landed and took off from, though this was from last Monday, and it was safe by the time I left on Thursday. Two planes almost crashed into each other Monday, almost crashed, in an incident that comes after multiple aviation accidents in recent months have rattled travelers. Delta Airlines told the Hill's sister network News Nation, where I used to report, that on one of its flights headed to Atlanta from Mexico City on Monday morning, flight crews on board observed another aircraft landing in front of their aircraft in the same runway as the flight started to take off. In a Tuesday statement, Aeromexico, this was Aeromexico and Delta, said regarding the event that occurred on July 21 on flight AM 1631 operating the Aguas Calientes to Mexico City route with an Embraer 190 aircraft, we informed that we are working closely to conduct a detailed investigation. So again,
Yikes.
they almost made contact at Mexico City, but for all concerned, I landed safely. I enjoyed the airport.
There you
Everything
go.
was fine. Yeah.
Just
So that
before
is.
Before we end stories from the sky, I was thinking about the lady with the short shorts, and then I was thinking about the coming down the rubber raft, the slide. Imagine if you wore the short shorts on the day you had to go down the slide. I mean, that it might be
exactly.
a little
That's right.
uncomfortable. Yeah,
Right, with your Versace bathrobe flying in the wind, and you have these shorts. Yeah, exactly. Dress
Not a
for
good
the
move.
slide, people. Or
Yeah.
she had the best idea, because if you were wearing nice fancy clothes and going down the slide, you'd ruin them, and you'd be thinking, why didn't I wear my singlet and whatever, my board shorts. So in any case, we leave the skies and we come back to Earth, and we come back, I think, to the animal kingdom. Do we not, Kim?
We
Now
do. Absolutely. That is Stories from the Sky.
This has been Stories from the Sky. The captain has turned off the seatbelt sign, and you are now free to move about the cabin.
Ah, yes. Time to go to the animal kingdom, Michael Shure.
it is. Yeah, I did not realize we had intro and outro music to Stories from the Sky. So apologies, but that was the first time I've done it, and I enjoyed it because, especially since I was in the sky yesterday. But now everybody wants a little taste of Mark Thompson, even though he's out and has been for a few days. He'll be back, I believe, is Wednesday the correct day to report, Kim? Yep, Mark comes back Wednesday, but we are not without Mark Thompson, I believe. Is that right? This is
Mark Thompson and Elizabeth MeLampy talking about these animal festivals, and it's a really interesting perspective. So I hope you'll enjoy this conversation.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this?
We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
All right, settle down, everybody. Settle down. We've got a very brilliant person joining us, and her work is super relevant and happens to hit my sweet spot. In fact, this is the book. It's called Forget the Camel, The Madcap World of Animal Festivals and What They Say About Being Human. This is a journey through animal festivals worldwide. And this brilliant lawyer who's been involved in animal rights issues and issues of policy regarding animals tours the world at all of these different festivals, some of which you'll know, like the Iditarod, and some of which you will not know or may only vaguely be aware of. They're like little local festivals, but they all share a lot in common. How about it for Elizabeth MeLampy, everyone? Yeah, you got it. So glad you did this book. It seems to me that our relationship with animals is something that is reflected in a lot of these festivals that you point to in the book. And that really is part of your thesis, that we can learn a lot about ourselves and our relationship with animals based on these festivals, that the way we see these festivals and the fact that they exist at all, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that these festivals are really sort of like fertile ground to start to unpack our relationship with animals, in part because, like you said, many of these events are kind of small events you might not have heard of. You don't bring a lot of kind of preconceived ideas or notions to the topic. Whereas if you're talking about, animals raised for food or animals used in sort of research, a lot of people have kind of pre-existing ideas and junk and bias in their brains about those topics, and it can be a good thing. I think those in some ways are bigger topics, but it also can get confusing and hard for people, and there's a lot of defensiveness and sort of kind of gut reactions that can muddy those waters. And so festivals to me felt like a really exciting way to explore animal relationships, because they don't kind of carry that same weight in our sort of social thinking.
Yeah, it's Elizabeth. It had to be somewhat daunting as a prospect to cover all of these festivals, and you really did sort of set out to cover the world with these festivals. And as some of them are local and maybe easy to get to, some of them more exotic, and you're writing a book about animals, and maybe people are feeling a little they might recoil from wanting to speak to you based on that. Take me through that, and then I really want to get to the essence of what you're talking about.
Sure. Yeah. So the book definitely took a lot of time and energy to research. And at the time I was working full time as a lawyer. And so, I would hop on a plane on Friday after work and take a late night flight somewhere, and often end up taking a red eye back for work on Monday morning. So it was definitely a whirlwind and a commitment for sure. And
not to interrupt, but one of the reasons you had this commitment, I was reading, was because your grandmother was a truly transformative figure in this world. You'll explain why. And she passed away, I think, before that work could actually be completed. So tell everybody that story, because I think it's quite compelling.
Thank you. Yeah. So the book idea kind of was my grandmother's. My grandmother was a veterinarian, and she later became an anthropologist who studied human-animal relationships, largely in the American West. She wrote books on like the rodeo and sort of like kind of Western conceptions of human-animal relationships. And when right before she died, she had started thinking about a book about animal festivals around the world. So thinking about some of the events that I covered and many more, including sort of events across Europe and different places in the world. And she passed away before she could finish that book, and before she really even got too far. Not much was written. She just had a lot of sort of like file folders and clippings and notes and that sort of thing. And I kind of in the back of my mind knew this growing up. I knew this was the book she was working on when she died. And it had always sort of been kind of floating out there as an unfinished project. And during COVID, I was reminded of one of these festivals. And so I it pinged in my brain, and I was like, oh yeah, like my grandmother went there. And I went to her boxes of files to see what was left. And I sort of realized that there's really something quite interesting happening here. And I think that kind of 30-year gap provided a really interesting set of materials for the book, which I draw on. I cite her notes. I sort of explain where my experience at these events differed from hers, and like what had changed in those 30 years or what had stayed the same. And I think that is really, lends a depth and sort of a historical aspect to the book that otherwise wouldn't be there. And so, yes, to your point about the travel, and it was definitely kind of a personal commitment too, to go see these places my grandmother saw and kind of try to get inside of her brain and feel these events in the way that she felt. So it was mostly, it was just a combination of sort of a personal component to this and also a very kind of like academic commitment to the ideas.
Sure, but that personal component, I think, really is probably the thing that kept you in the game, because I'm just looking at this project and seeing it as a real challenge, and you do such a nice job with it. It's called Forget the Camel because of this festival. Explain to everyone why this title exists and how it really does kick the door open to what you're talking about.
Yeah, so the title Forget the Camel comes from an event in the book, which is called the International Camel and Ostrich Races. And at this event, at these races, humans like mount and then ride camels and ostriches, respectively, around kind of a track. And it's not a very serious race. So it's not like, the Kentucky Derby, or it's not a race that's designed for speed or for.
It's like a spectacle, sort of, huh?
Yeah, it's kind of like a bull ride. Like it's, people trying to hold on. It's like people trying to avoid falling off. And the falling off is inevitable. People always fall off. That's part of the fun as an audience member, was to sort of, everyone around us was cracking up and sort of laughing as it had a very like slapstick affect to it as people kind of flew off the backs of camels and hit the ground and all of that. So during one particular race, a camel race, someone flew off the back of a camel and hit the ground. And when they did, the MC of the race shouted out, or right before the camel sort of was running off in a different direction. And so all the handlers kind of rushed to control the camel. They wanted to get the camel back under control, walk it back to the start line. And the handler yelled out, forget the camel, check on Charlie, like the guy who had fallen off the camel. And I just thought that was such a good sort of summation of the book as a whole, because it really, at these events, it does demand, like these events are all based around a single animal. They're all based around the idea of using an animal in some sort of like ritualistic or entertainment-based or spectacle-based way. But at the same time, these events demand that you step back and actually can't really think about the animals, because if you did, you couldn't be doing whatever it is you were doing. So it both sort of foregrounds the animals and asks that they are pushed into the background. And so I think that duality is really kind of the heart of animal festivals, and honestly, partially the heart of our relationships to animals more broadly. I think that we often, we all love animals. There's lots of animal lovers out there. But we do sort of ignore a lot of the worst parts of what we do to animals in order to stay sane and fall asleep at night. And I think those two pieces are really compelling to me.
Oh, such a great title and such a great incident to illustrate that, it would seem to me. There's the ostrich race. For those of you just listening on the podcast, there's a guy sitting on an ostrich that's running, So, because as you suggest, animals are at the center of these festivals, but they're really just being, to cite your word, used as something that coheres everybody who shows up and the things attendant to a festival. They show up for the frog jumping, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff there. They're selling, baked goods, and there's, it's a festival. But what you're saying is that the essence of it, the idea is the creature is just a thing and is being treated sort of as a thing by those that are attending the festival. So take us through some of the other stuff here, and you break the book up into 3 parts, and it's done very smartly. Each part is sort of stacked on the other.
Yeah, so the 3 parts are dominance, humor, and reverence. And I chose those 3 parts because to me, they are sort of like broad kind of categories of how we relate to animals, just kind of more generally. And so these festivals all really kind of fall into one or more of those categories. And so it became a really good way, I think, to structure how we think about these events and how we think about animals more broadly. And so dominance is sort of, I think a relatively obvious paradigm. I think there's a lot of contexts in which we use animals kind of with cruelty, or we kill them for food, or there's a whole swath of human-animal relationships that are dominated by dominance. And then humor is a sort of like strange middle category. So that's where the camel and ostrich race was, because it's these like It was a very slapstick, everyone was laughing, very funny, family-friendly event. But at the same time, there's something like a little harsh in it too. I mean, the camels were certainly not thrilled with their afternoon. And then the last section is reverence. And so in those contexts, I think there's a lot of animals that we look to as sort of like symbols of hope or as a species that we love. So like our dogs and cats, I think, fall into this reverence category. And so each of those categories, they're not perfect by any means, but I think they're helpful starting places to help sort of guide our bigger picture thinking about animals. And these festivals, as I started researching, slot right into those categories almost to a T. I mean, some of them are more complicated, but a lot of them fit right in. And so I think, dominance, I'll start with an example from there, I guess, is in some ways the most, like I said, the most sort of clear cut. I think it's the easiest to imagine examples of dominance. And the chapter that starts the book is about the rattlesnake roundup in Sweetwater, Texas. So this is a event where hunters gather snakes from the wild around West Texas, and they bring them in alive to sort of like a central facility, a big kind of arena. And then throughout the roundup weekend, these snakes are killed in front of the audience. They're beheaded, and then people skin the snakes sort of like as an attraction. Tourists can sign up to skin a snake. It's very bloody. It's very gory. They pull out the muscle and then they deep fry it. And you can buy like fried snake meat if you want. It's very sort of like a visceral event. But at this event, I think there's, like you mentioned, there's a lot else going on. There's like a carnival. There's, all sorts of like tchotchkes and knickknacks for sale. It's just like there's a lot going on. And so I think all of these events, the animal piece is central for sure, but it is not sort of like, it's not the only thing that's going on. And I think that's interesting. I think it's interesting to think about why, this event is called the Rattlesnake Roundup, and it brings people in from all across the country. This killing pit is sort of, that's the touristic draw. That's why people are coming, but there's a lot more to it than just that.
I also think about the religiosity that overlays some of this stuff. I think of elephants in Asia and how they're supposedly celebrated. They are encumbered with these hundreds and hundreds of pounds of stuff that they put on them. And of course, they're in the middle of these festivals that are loud and immensely disruptive emotionally. They give them tranquilizers to kind of chill them out a little bit, but these are still incredibly big animals that are having to stand there with all of this stuff on them for hours and hours, sometimes days at a time. They just stand in one place. It's a horribly debilitating thing. And yet this is, again, a festival. I love that these things are called festivals because, as you've said, sort of at the center of it is this creature, a sentient feeling creature, feels fear, feels happiness, feels a sadness, feels loss, all of these things. And it's being forced to, in the case of the elephant example, stand there day after day after day, supposedly being worshipped, but in truth being abused.
Exactly. And I think that's sort of, spoiler alert about the book. I think that, the dominance, humor, and reverence sections, they sound really different in theory, right? Like it sounds different to have an event that is based in reverence, that is based in worshiping an animal. But I think there's a lot of forms of reverence that actually look a lot like dominance. It's just sort of framed differently, but you're not allowing the animal to thrive. You're not considering what the animal wants. You're not sort of, putting your needs and your interests secondary to that of the animal that you're supposedly worshiping and wishing to sort of respect or put up on a pedestal. And the same thing in humor. I think humor seems so harmless. Like, who cares if we're making fun of a few animals or we're sort of having a good laugh at an animal's expense? Especially in the case of both the camels and the other event that I put in the humor section was the Jumping Frog Jubilee, where they sort of jump frogs. It's basically a competition to see which frog can jump the farthest. And in both of those events, they don't kill the animals. It's not violent. It's not sort of, it's not like the Rattlesnake Roundup, right? There's something a little more jovial going on, but at the same time, it's not great for the animals. They're taken out of their homes. They're forced to do these things that are scary to them. And I think that does come at a real cost to those animals' lives. And so it absolutely is, I think, at the core of my book that while these three categories kind of all exist and they all look really different at face value, then once you start digging in, there might not be that much kind of differentiating that at all. And I think that, the goal, the project is to get towards a form of reverence that is meaningful, that really does something, thoughtful for the animals and takes them in their world and their space seriously. Because at the end of the day, I'm not sure there's a world where we can get away from animal festivals. I think we live on a multi-species planet, and I think we're always going to look around and use animals to try to figure out who we are as humans and as sort of a species ourselves. And so I think the goal for me when I think about these festivals is just a way to find finding a way to do that more thoughtfully, more holistically, more sort of considerately of the animals.
You're so lovely to put it that way. A multi-species planet. I see us, of course, that's indisputable, but the way in which we view ourselves sort of as the top of the species pyramid and that everything else is kind of for our use, I think informs a lot of this. Is my opinion, but I just feel that's played out in our relationship with animals. And I love that you even took a talk about, Puxatawny Phil. And, I think of Puxatawny Phil every year, and I just think, oh, that poor creature. And I understand it's become such big business. My God, they did a movie, what am I trying to say? A box office hit movie, Groundhog Day. And this Puxatawny Phil thing, again, it's something, people go there from all over the world. It becomes a festival. And this poor creature is at the center of it. And again, you can say, well, just one creature or whatever it might be. But, it's reflective of what you suggested in your book, which is that our relationship with that creature is as a prop instead of as a holistic being.
Yes. And I think it means more. It's sort of like I say in my Punxsutawney Phil chapter, I have this line where I sort of say, like, am I just a big bummer for pointing this out? Like, this is a fun event. Like, everyone's having a great time. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, but what about the groundhog? Like, and, when you think about the scope of harm in the world, like, you think about all the atrocities and all the pain and all the suffering, like, does the fact that one groundhog had to sit in a plexiglass tube for one day actually really matter, like in the grand scheme of things? And so I wrestle with that in the book, because on the one hand, it's pretty obviously no, right? Like, obviously we have bigger picture issues going on in the world. But on the other hand, I think events like this do some bigger work on structuring our relationships to animals actively. So I think at every single event I went to in the book, there were children and families and people learning and teaching how we use animals, what's normal, what's okay. And I think reinscribing those paradigms where animals are props. And so then it becomes, a lot harder to change how we're interacting with animals kind of on a broader scale, because we have these normalized assumptions about animals, that it's okay to commit violence against them. It's okay to use them for our jokes. It's okay to stick them in a plexiglass tube just because we want to. And I think that kind of walking back those assumptions is hard work, but is an important part of the book. And I think, to your point about Groundhog Day too, one of the other sort of like big picture things that I wrestle with a lot in the book is this idea that these events are fun and they're very meaningful. All of them are so meaningful to local people, local communities. No one spends time, energy, and money putting on something that they don't care about. And so when you dig deeper into these stories, into the histories of the events, into the people who are putting them on, these are local communities and local people who really care deeply. And I think that the events also bring a lot of good to those communities. So they raise a lot of money. A lot of these communities are small, and this money is really valuable. It's really important to their sort of year-round operations. A lot of these events raise sort of like awareness for certain like local civic causes or what have you. And then it also just does sort of more intangible good, sort of like making people feel like proud to be where they're from, or sort of happy to participate in this big thing. They volunteer. They sort of like, it's a big community community building event, identity building event, that sort of thing. And so the book really wrestles with how do we balance all of that good with the real harm that is happening. So like, I don't try to ignore that good. This is not sort of a diatribe about animal rights in a way that is completely ignorant of the human interests involved. It very much tries to balance those things and say, okay, yes, there's lots of good that comes from this. How can we keep that good and also respect and take care of the animals who we're forcing to play this part to tell our own stories that they have no interest in playing? And I think those two aspects, the human good and the animal harm, kind of have to start being in conversation with each other. Yeah, you feel that tug of war in the book. The book, again, is called Forget the Camel for those listening and not watching. We have it up on screen for YouTube viewers. And we'll have a link under this video so you can get the book for yourself. I think about the contrast just in our last couple of minutes, because Groundhog Day, as you say, sort of feels like, and I'll use this phrase, although it doesn't really apply, like a victimless crime in a way, although, because as you say, the animal survives, and even though traumatized, et cetera, there's enough maybe flourish around it, that is to say the community flourishes, et cetera, that maybe, it's offset, however. But I think about other festivals, and there are festivals that occur around the world that are not so great.
there's no humor in the Taiji Cove where they herd dolphins and they slaughter them in cold blood with kids present, as you suggest. I mean, they drive them in with boats and they slaughter them in cold blood. It's a horrible thing to see in the movie. The Cove shows you a bit of it. It also happens in the Faroe Islands with kids there. Imagine bringing your kids, your 6, 7, 8-year-old kids in while daddy slaughters this dolphin right in front with a knife. It's unbelievably cruel and horrible. And these are sentient, smart, wonderful, beautiful creatures. So I think of that stuff and I get angry at the stubbornness, honestly, of society on these things. I mean, haven't we evolved to the point where we realize this is barbarism? But apparently not. So when you say the festivals will never stop, probably, and I take it, rodeo seems like it won't, et cetera, but there are problems there. Do you think that the manifest cruelty associated with something like Taiji and the Faroe Islands and those kinds of festivals, do you feel as though we might eventually evolve past that?
I hope so. I think that I saw glimmers of that in my research. So my grandmother, when she was looking at this stuff 30 years ago, she was planning sort of a chapter and had a bunch of research on a pigeon shoot that took place in Pennsylvania. So it was sort of like an event where, they'd release pigeons and then, attendees or participants would shoot them. And often those pigeons would not die. And it sort of had this sort of horrible culture of people then running onto the killing field and kind of finishing the job, stomping on them, ripping off their heads, that sort of thing, like really violent, really gory. And that event is no longer happening in Pennsylvania. In the 30 years since my grandmother was working on it, that event, animal advocates worked really hard in the state and they brought some really good litigation that eventually sort of, was the death knell for that event. Pigeon shoots still happen, but that big kind of public one that was sort of this core festival, that no longer happens. And so there's glimmers of hope out there. I would call that a glimmer. It's not perfect. We still have the Rattlesnake Roundup. Like that was the other big dominance festival. And I went to that and it was really hard. It was hard to watch people, like you said, sort of like cold-bloodedly kill these animals who didn't do anything wrong. They were just like sleeping in their dens one day and then they got brought in here and now suddenly they're being beheaded in public and people are making handprints with their blood. Like that isn't it, just because they're snakes. Like I don't really like snakes and I think a lot of people don't, but it doesn't mean that they are deserving of that fate either. And so it's definitely not perfect. I mean, the world is still adjusting, but I do think in the United States, at least, there's some movement away from those killing festivals, at least so brazenly, So the other chapter that I referenced, that I write up in the dominant section after the Rattlesnake Roundup, is about the Maine Lobster Festival. The Maine Lobster Festival is a really different vibe than the Rattlesnake Roundup or than the dolphin hunts you just referenced. It's not sort of gleeful or sort of violent in that same way. But I went on a thought exercise in this chapter and putting it in this dominant section because at the end of the day, they're hunting a bunch of animals, bringing them in alive, killing them in public, and then eating the flesh. And it really isn't all that different. I think we as Americans think of lobster as food animals, and therefore, their death is sort of preordained in some sense that we don't challenge all that seriously. But when you put it next to the Rattlesnake Roundup or dolphin hunts or any of these events where killing is central, and you start really saying like, what is different about that? The list of differences is sort of shorter than you might think, and that's sort of one of the many sort of thought exercises I try to push in my book, because I think the question of like how we treat animals is so ingrained in our brains. It's like so deep. We have such different ideas for different species. We think a lobster is meant to be eaten, a snake isn't, a cow is meant to be eaten, so who cares if we farm them? We have all sorts of, like I said, junk up here about animals. And I think when you start kind of paring it down and saying, okay, like what's logically rational about these few things, it can help unravel some of those things.
I congratulate you on the book. Forget the Camel is the name of the book, The Madcap World of Animal Festivals and What They Say About Being Human. Elizabeth MeLampy, it's such a project. You can tell it's such a project because you cover so much, and I just applaud you, and I applaud your work as an attorney. I know you're not doing that, you had mentioned right this instant, meaning at this point in your life, but you have done it. You've done a lot of heavy lifting, and it's just it's exciting to see this work. Forget the Camel is the book. We'll have a link to it under this this video and under this conversation. And again, thank you for spending some time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And here we are. This is the Mark Thompson Show, and I'm in the wrong. There you go. That's right.
Look at that. Yeah. Good job, Mark. That was an interesting conversation. I like some of the people I was looking in the comments. Some of the people can't go all the way with it, but I get where they're coming from, and the book certainly seems like a good read. And if Mark says someone is good and smart, I'll listen to Mark all the time on that. It's just that I do see, like she said at the end, that I think the list of reasons why that the Lobster Festival and the Rattlesnake Roundup are different. There is a list of reasons why, but it's a short list, but it's still a compelling list. Celebrating it is different. But anyway, that's what makes
I thought it was interesting because it's like, maybe you go to these things or you see the posters for them and you don't really think about it, but it kind of gives you pause to maybe consider another way of thinking. Yeah.
There's no question. I think we all,
to quote Mike Johnson,
everyone who eats meat is it sounds like Mike Johnson. Everyone who eats meat is slightly hypocritical, right? Because John Watson asking if I've ever attended a bullfight in Mexico City. No, I was asking about bullfights there. It's not legal in Mexico anymore. I've never been to one there. When I was 16 years old, I went to a bullfight in Malaga, Spain, and it was so horrible and offensive. It was interesting culturally. I will say that even as a 16-year-old, I found it compelling, but I didn't last long there that day, and I didn't feel like I missed much. But yeah, they've gotten rid of them too. I mean, there's progress, and that's the other part of this. How do you tell Maine not to have a lobster festival when that is part of their commerce? And Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, is going to be bringing out apparently, because I've read stories about it before, a groundhog that lives longer than any other groundhog would ever live in the wild, and is treated like a king, and then has a difficult day every year, perhaps difficult, but I don't know enough about that. But so anyway, there's progress being made, and yeah, I remember when I was a kid, you could watch the bullfight on television on the Spanish channels. Like it was that much of it. And the Matador was so heralded, but it's changed a lot, which I think is a good thing. Bullfights are horrible, and they would always say that they're brought to, all the meat is brought to the orphanages in the town, and the bull has a chance because the bull can hurt the Matador. Bull doesn't really have a chance. They're with the picadors riding around horses next to it and stabbing it in the neck. That's it's pretty gross. It's pretty gross and pretty bad. Before we go, I want to honor the memory of Tom Lehrer, and that's he was a musical satirist, I guess. He died at 97. He was also a mathematician. I'd heard him on NPR before. There was a musical called Tomfoolery about all his satire. He was like a dressed up Weird Al Yankovic before Weird Al came on the scene. And he was very well known. And here's one of the things, like when you listen to Tom Lehrer, because he was a mathematician, he was all about staying on the faculty at UC Santa Cruz. And he died at 97. He was there into his late 70s, and he left his own copyright, granting the public permission to use his lyric in any format without any fee in return, which is kind of cool. He had one famous one he did was The Elements, which is where he sang the periodic table, and we can listen to a little bit of that. But every element to the tune of, I am a very model of a modern Major General from Pirates of Penzance. That's from Pirates of Penzance. Let's listen to
There's antimony, arsenic, aluminum, selenium, and hydrogen, and oxygen, and nitrogen, and rhenium, and nickel, neodymium, neptunium, germanium, and iron, americium, ruthenium, uranium, europium, zirconium, lutetium, vanadium, and lanthanum, and osmium, and astatine, and radium, and gold, actinium, and indium, and gallium, and iodine, and thorium, and thulium, and thallium. There's yttrium, ytterbium, actinium, rubidium, and boron, gadolinium, niobium, iridium, and strontium, and silicon, and silver, and samarium, and bismuth, bromine, lithium, beryllium, and barium. I left out one, actually. A new one was discovered since the song was written. It's called Lawrencium. So those of you who are taking notes can write it down in your programs. There's holmium and helium and hafnium and erbium and phosphorus and francium and fluorine and terbium and manganese and mercury and molybdenum and magnesium and dysprosium and scandium and cerium and cesium and lead, praseodymium and platinum, plutonium, palladium, promethium, potassium, polonium, tantalum, magnesium, titanium, tellurium and cadmium and calcium and chromium and curium. There's gold and californium and fermium, berkelium and also metallium, einsteinium, nobelium and argon, kryptonium, radon, xenon, zinc, and rhodium and chlorine, carbon, cobalt, copper, tungsten, tin, and sodium. These are the only ones of which the news has come to Harvard. And there may be many others, but they haven't been discovered.
So Tom Lehrer gone at 97, but leaves us with a lot of funny music, and not only that, he does it while he's playing the piano, and he remembers it all.
Very cool. You told me that he was on PBS a lot.
Well, I heard him on NPR. It was NPR.
Okay.
Yeah, I heard him as a guest on NPR very frequently.
Yeah, and it's a bummer that where you have these cuts now to, to NPR, to public television and public radio, and we might not have cool stuff like that in the future.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's going to be fewer and far between, and maybe we're an administration away from correcting that. But let's see. That was it was just nice to hear that, and that's pretty impressive. So, but yeah, keep those PBS dollars rolling in. I'm sure Tom Lehrer would like to leave us with that for certain. I will be back here tomorrow. I'll look at that. Oh yeah. You know what? I love a Sure Thing. Can I get more than 47 seconds of sports every day? Well, we'll do 47. We didn't do a branded 47, but we did talk about baseball in Mexico and.
Mm-hmm.
Eyes of bullfighting. So in effect, we talked a little bit about sports, but yeah, can we get one? I don't know if he's asking for a sports show. I don't want to do that, but I would love to do a show that had a good mix of both politics and sports, because I like politics. I got to like politics so much because I liked sports beforehand, and I see politics as a sort of a blood sport, I guess.
An extension.
Yeah. Tony?
Real fast.
Yeah.
Bad news. Abrams and Zucker are just credited as creators of Naked Gun. And he's actually said, and he's not happy what they're doing to his baby. He's literally quoted.
Oh no.
It's not what I would have done. I don't want to just lash out at what they're doing, but I'd like to. It's not what I would have done. It's not our style. It's strange seeing it. Yeah, I cannot imagine that doing it without them is going to get their endorsement anyway, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but they didn't do it, and it, somebody I hope
it's good.
Who said that, like, something about comedy? I hope it's good too, man. Let's just have a good comedy, and the versatility from Liam Neeson is a cool thing too. So I'm sure that'll be fun.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. It comes out Friday, and we will see you tomorrow. Everybody have a good, safe Monday, and come on back. Thank you to Tony. Thank you to Tim. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to Gary Dietrich for stopping by.
Tomorrow we have David K. Johnston on the show, and that's going to be a great conversation between you two. Also, Jefferson Graham will be here. So it's shaping up to be a great Tuesday show, Michael Shure.
Excellent. All right. See you then.
Bye, everybody. Bye.